Your spirit was here.
Okay, welcome to the July 5th, 2016 meeting of the Water Reclamation Facility Citizens Advisory Committee. We have a quorum. Dale Guerra is not here. He let us know he wouldn't be in attendance today. So I'll call this meeting to order, and if we could please have a moment of silence. Thank you, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, are there any announcements or presentations by staff? None? Any members have any announcements they would like to give? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. This is your opportunity to speak on anything that's not on the agenda. Is there any public comment today? All right, rolling right through. We'll move on to the consent calendar and its approval of the minutes. Any comments on the minutes or changes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as stated.
Okay.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll give this motion to Jenny. Any public comment before we vote? It's okay. No, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes unanimously. Business item B1 is Wolf Water Reclamation Facility Subcommittee updates. And we'll start in order here. Finance, do you have an update for us today?
I do.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a quick update on the Cayuga Sustainable Water Project. As I mentioned at our last WRF-CAC meeting, CSD is looking at 3 treatment process alternatives. Actually, they're looking at 2 at this point. And they've just had a recent meeting on May 19th. And basically, Water Systems Consulting provided an overview of treatment objectives, treatment process alternatives, evaluation criteria, cost evaluation assumptions, and treatment technology screening evaluation. They concluded that the advantages of an oxidation ditch are slightly lower cost, peak flow and loading resiliency. There's an option for bypass filtration during peak flows, and the ability to phase tertiary treatment. For MBR, that's the second treatment technology that's remained. The advantages included high water quality, reliability, small footprint, and better odor mitigation options. Since I wasn't at the meeting, I don't know what the Board of Directors' priorities and preferences are, nor if they've even stated a preferred treatment process alternative, but I do intend to follow up with that. Based on the presentation that I found on CSD's website, the next steps for the project are to refine the preferred treatment alternative. That includes process sizing, footprint requirements, and conduct studies, including solids handling and supporting facilities needs assessment, and prepare a conceptual site plan and prepare a facilities plan. So I'm going to continue to monitor that, and I'm still hopeful that someday we may end up together on this project, either at Chevron or at our preferred site. And one last comment, this is on the budget. I know we're not going to really be talking about that today, but I just wanted you to know that I'm really looking forward to the report on the annual budget at the next meeting. And in the meantime, I'd like to follow up on a comment that Valerie made a few months ago regarding DACs. Specifically, she wondered how Morro Bay's pockets of poverty could be considered DACs, and she said that although the city as a whole may not qualify as a DAC under the State Water Resources Control Board definition, and I believe that's 45,000. She mentioned that Morro Bay's contractor for LEAP shows Morro Bay's average salary of $35,000, and that's based on different breakdowns and manipulations of employment and earnings data. And I know that she mentioned this to you, Mike, and I'm wondering whether anybody has followed up on this, because this could be a negotiating point with the State Water Resources Control Board for a grant. And that's it.
Okay, we'll go to you first with your question.
Jenny, you mentioned Cayucas has a bypass filtration system plan for during overload, and we know overload's going to be 4 or 5 normal flow, 4 to 5 times over. Did they say what they have in mind? I assume they're going to use the existing facility and out the pipe that goes out now.
That was my assumption too, but again, I wasn't at the meeting. However, this is what I saw on their website. They provide all the presentations on their website for people that are interested.
Did you have an answer for the question about DACs?
Sure, I'd be glad to respond to that. So the DAC,
let's just back up. That stands for disadvantaged community.
I'm sorry, that's correct.
Yeah, just so
Disadvantaged
the
community.
public knows. Okay.
That's correct. So part of the process with State Water Resource Control Board, when you submit your general application for loans or grants, is they automatically begin looking at you and determine which of their funding buckets you might qualify for. And one of them is the Small Community Grant Program, for example, which is determined based on whether you're considered a small disadvantaged community, a small DAC. And so one of the first things that State Board's project manager for our loans came back with was that the city did not qualify as a DAC, as a community. Now, what you pointed out, though, is a really good point. There are pockets within the city that do qualify as disadvantaged communities. And I know that the city has used that before for other funding programs. So, for instance, an example could be there may be a DWR funding program that can be applied towards a community that has a percentage that's a DAC. There may be some other sources of funding that can be applied towards that. But in terms of the State Water Board and them assessing us for that small community grant program, for example, the city did not qualify because the median income was too high citywide, even though there are some pockets of DACs. So we're going to continue to, as we move forward through the facility master planning process and master reclamation plan, we have a better defined, more precise project description, and as we move forward through CEQA, then we're going to be vetting and evaluating all the grant and funding opportunities based on city demographics, every possible thing we might qualify for. For example, if there's an opportunity to look at irrigation for a park along the way, maybe that could help the city qualify for some park funding. So we're going to try to find every possible tie that we can, but we really need the project description and we need to be farther along in the CEQA process, because the projects that compete the most favorably with state and federal funding are projects that are closer to shovel ready. And so we've really got to get through these planning steps before we can really, I would say, cost effectively and successfully start identifying and capturing those grant opportunities.
Okay, so that $45,000 figure is absolutely concrete. There's no wiggle room whatsoever with the State Water Resources Control Board.
I'll go back and check what that figure was and where we ranked with it, and I'll get back to you. I'll send an email out.
In my experience, they're very rigid with their guidelines. Very, extremely. They have to implement it statewide, and making exceptions here and there become challenging. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Richard, did you have a comment?
Yeah, regarding that, I sent you an email, and it had to do with the collection infrastructure. And this is one of the areas where, one of the areas that was identified from my research as a disadvantaged community area is right there by Highway 41 and Main Street. And for Prop 1 funding. And recently, one of the communities down in South had received grant funding, Prop 1 funding for sewer collection infrastructure repair. Now, it's our understanding, or my understanding, is that Black and Veatch, or all your comparisons for the WRF are under the assumption that we're going to put a major lift station pretty much at the existing location of the wastewater treatment plant. Given that, that's a variable that is constant. And so I'm kind of questioning the need for CEQA and EIR for the WRF as a whole, when we could split that and address the collection infrastructure that we know is dilapidated, we know is leaking sewage into the Morro Basin aquifer. And the last time I talked to, what was the lady's name from Kestrel? Monica? Yeah, Monica, when we first met with her over a year ago, or almost 2 now, it'll bring us right to the top if we're dealing with water quality issues. So that infrastructure needs to be repaired anyway. And I think that, the WRF build team should be looking at that separately, since that variable can be removed from the WRF facilities master plan. And also we have a letter from the California Coastal Commission saying that we have to address that issue anyway. In addition to that, we had a recent sewer master management plan audit, and that flow study, that 2006 sewage flow study that's referenced, I was involved in that study back in the day, and the negative deck that was applied to that was also had to do with the, pushing, pretty much kicking that can down the stream as far as the environmental impacts. So I really feel that it's a missed opportunity here if we don't, address that infrastructure immediately, and we could keep moving on the WRF accordingly.
Okay, any other finance update from the subcommittee?
Thank you, John. Yes, I just want a couple brief comments on the budget, and my apologies, I was unable to attend the last meeting, but I wanted to thank my colleagues and Ginny for bringing up some of the budget, and I reviewed that discussion. It looks like you had a very good discussion on that. I am also very much looking forward to, Mike, the quarterly fiscal year-end budget report, as well as on the Finance Committee, the Citizens Finance Committee. We are doing some things looking at budget-friendly reports for the public, and I will ask Ms. Slayton to pull the total fiscal year expenditures for the WRF for last year, and then hopefully we'll have something good to start with that will indicate the revenues and expenditures and tie in with the amended budget that was just recently approved by the City Council. And finally, along those lines, the Citizens Finance Committee is holding a public workshop the last Tuesday in August right here. That's Tuesday, August 30th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. to solicit public input on budget-friendly documents, summary documents, graphs, etc., for the, not specific to the WRF-CAC, but specific general to all the budget, the general and the enterprise funds, streets, etc. So we welcome anybody that would like to attend that and give us some input so that we can work that in conjunction with this committee. Any questions? Thank you, guys.
I would like to respond to the collection system comment, though, from Mr. Sadowski. I appreciate your comments there. What I would say is we're concerned about collection system impacts to tie into the new lift station site, wherever it might be. The Main Street sewer has been part of a city CIP, either rehabbing that, or replacing that, or upgrading segments of that has been in the city CIP for a while now. My sense is the majority of that's going to be covered under the city's CIP and under their upcoming master plan update effort. And where we really pick up is really right in the vicinity of the lift station with the water reclamation facility. and then through the water reclamation facility, and then through the water reuse delivery system. So our involvement upstream of that collection system, other than to have a good understanding of it, know where it's going to tie into the lift station. The traditional CIP that would be associated with the collection system upstream of that's going to be handled separately from us. So I didn't want you to think we're missing something or not looking at something or not doing something there on the funding.
Well, the problem with that is currently Cayucas is out of the picture. Okay, so there's infrastructure there that you have to deal with anyway. And then as far as the CIP, we've been told by the staff that back in 2007 that they were going to do it in 2008. Meanwhile, our dilapidated infrastructure keeps on leaching. So I feel that it's an opportunity to tie it in together, since all that infrastructure is going to be tied into a huge lift station on WWTP. So, at the current location. So I kind of disagree. I feel that it is part of this, you're going to have to deal, you can't deal with it the way it is set up right now anyway, because of the Cayucas dedicated line and the, dealing with the 60/40 line that Cayucas still owns. So those are kind of issues that still are open and really need to be resolved pretty quickly.
Is it a multi-year CIP program?
Yes, it is.
So if the final location of the lift station was established and that it made sense to reallocate some of the cycle of the CIP to address some of the lift station issues, if there are opportunities there, that can happen then, right? Because it's a living document.
And we do need some final resolution with the Cayucas, because if they're out of it completely, there are different options to repair that line than if they're planning to use it. It appears that they're out of it, but we have not yet confirmed that, and we're still operating under our existing agreement with Cayucas, and they own 40% of the line. I guess probably the next JPA, that will be a topic of discussion, the jointly owned facilities and how we're going to deal with those. Just want to also reassure the public that we worked with the regional board on the investigation on the leaking underground sewer lines, and they chose no action because it does not pose a significant threat, does not rise to the level of a nuisance, so they recommended no action on those sewer lines. Thank you.
Okay, that's environmental. Do you have an update?
Well, I'd like to make a comment.
Richard, we're not here to talk about the line.
We need to address.
No, the scope of this is the water reclamation facility, and we go every meeting we go through this. So I'm moving on. Environmental has no update. Engineering, you have an update.
No. The issue with the Cayucas, as far as the 60/40 line, am I not correct that they removed their option to be able to divert their flow?
Not 100% yet.
They have not removed the option to divert their flow at Yerba Buena.
They can still continue to use that line.
Okay. Is there any public comment on item B1? These are updates from the subcommittees.
Yeah, Marla Jo Bruton Sadowski, and I'd like to address the regional board comment there and let my community know that the regional board in Santa Barbara over a year ago was sued and lost to a citizens group for allowing dilapidated sewage infrastructure in the city of Santa Barbara. That did not include contaminating a drinking water aquifer like we have here. So I take issue with the fact that the regional board says it's fine, and so my community doesn't have to know that we're having sewage leaking into our drinking water aquifer. And most of the severely disadvantaged communities that I'm aware of, excuse me, this is very emotional for me, and it should be for my entire community. There are 3 other communities. There were 4 communities with severe contamination of nitrates the regional board addressed in 2012. Morro Bay was one of them. The other three were severely disadvantaged communities. They had sewage contaminating their aquifers. Morro Bay it was decided it wasn't our sewage, it was the nitrates from the farmers. All right, we were different. I'm so upset thinking every single day that people are flushing their toilets, going down those sewage lines there, and it's entering our aquifer. Does people not understand what I'm saying here? And I take a great issue. Is that what America's come to? That citizens who don't have a lot of money have to put money together to hire attorneys, to fight their city, to fight their regional board, to get clean water. And the lackadaisical approach of the city is like, oh, well, we have a desal. I'd like to see what our desal cleans and what it doesn't clean. Just because something isn't tested for doesn't mean it's not there. And I would like to have real tests for sewage done on our drinking water aquifer, and I don't know why that hasn't been done.
You're coming up on your 3 minutes if you want to wrap up.
All right, I'll be kind to you and wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right, this is a receive and consider updates. I think we've done that. We can move on to item B2. This is the Water Reclamation Facility Program update. Turn it over to staff.
Thank you. So the first section of our staff report and our update gives a few bullets with our accomplishments and milestones since our last update. So we presented the recommendation to City Council on June 14th to select the South Bay Boulevard site as the preferred project site for planning. City Council voted to move forward with the site. We received approval for the scope and budget amendment for the facility master plan at the June 14th City Council meeting. I want to thank the members of the engineering subcommittee for reviewing that and providing comments prior to that council meeting. We didn't have time to circulate that to the full WRF-CAC, but I did want to get comments back from engineering subcommittee, and they all supported the council's recommended approval to council. Completed field work for the geotechnical evaluation at the South Bay Boulevard site. No fatal flaws were found during the field work, so we're waiting on the geotech reports from that to give us an idea of the foundation design for the new structures. Continued the biological and cultural studies at South Bay Boulevard site. Initiated topographic and boundary survey. We already had some topographic information from past work there and had quite a bit of information on the property boundaries, but now we're getting design level information together. Updated the community outreach plan, and John will jump into that in a minute. Reinitiated the CEQA and the EIR efforts and coordinated them with the facility master plan team. In fact, we had a meeting earlier today on that. Updated the program schedule, which is attached, and then met with the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff to discuss the permit renewal for the existing wastewater treatment plant. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to John Rickenbach to give an overview of the updated outreach plan.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Chair, members of the WRF-CAC. What I want to do is just very briefly go over information that's in your packet already, but I think mostly for the benefit of the public who have not seen that, which this is a good place to reset where we are. Now we have a site selection, we're in a better position or a site selection to move forward with on the FMP. We're in a better position now to recalibrate where we need to go on the outreach program. What you have in your packet is really an update of what was originally provided in September 2015, and not only shows where we're going now, but also looks backward to see what we've done since that time. And you can follow through that to see all the different workshops and WRFCAC meetings and newsletters and emails and such, and of course the website to follow where the program's gone so far. What we've done in the updated version of the outreach program is provide both a short and long-term look at that. What I'd like to do is go over in a little bit of detail what we expect to happen over the next 6 months or so. As Mike pointed out, we did have a meeting today with the EIR consultant, ESA, to really kick off their work relative to the site that Council had directed us to at the South Bay Boulevard site, and how that process will lay out. We want to talk about that, and in the context of the facility master plan too, an outreach that'll go relative to those two efforts that go hand in hand. I think in the very short term, what we're looking at is kicking off the EIR process in depth, and we're looking at trying to circulate a notice of preparation for the EIR, likely in August, and that will provide the precursor to an EIR scoping meeting, which we also expect to be in August. A very preliminary date, this hasn't been confirmed, is August 16th. We're trying to see if that works, but sometime in the middle of August for a EIR scoping meeting, the purpose of which there will be to get public input and agency input on what the issues we should be looking at in the EIR. I think what you'll find is we're going to be doing a very comprehensive look at the issues in that EIR, try to cast as wide a net as possible so we understand what all the possible impacts might be. But again, we want to hear specifically issues we should be covering within those broader topics. It'll also be an opportunity to hear any other input relative to contents of what the EIR should include. We'll take that information and then refine the EIR scope if we need to, and it'll provide some of the basis for helping develop the alternatives to the project as well, which is an EIR requirement, and then we move forward from there. Then at that time, we're also looking at the facility master plan being fleshed out. That is to say, an actual plan for development at the South Bay Boulevard site, which will form the basis of the EIR project description. We expect that to, in fact, it's right now in the beginning stages of the development of the actual site itself. We're going to refine that going into the fall, and then have a workshop or two to discuss the basic contents of what that might be, and then that will lead to consideration by your board in November, in all likelihood, of the draft facility master plan that is based on some public input and a lot of the technical work that was done in 2015 and into the early part of this year, to the extent that's transferable, and much of it largely is, to the South Bay Boulevard site. At that point, when you consider that and make a recommendation to council about any changes to that, the council will then presumably give us the nod to say, yes, this is a facility master plan we'd like to go forward for study in the EIR with, and then that takes it from there. We expect that to occur at the end of the year, November to December of this year. So that will really allow for the EIR to dive into depth on all the issues about that plan. And in that plan, we'll define sort of the area and the types of facilities and to the extent possible, the location and configuration of those facilities. We will also have some, simultaneously, we're beginning work on the water reclamation plan, the master water reclamation plan, and the opportunities there we're exploring within the context of that. To the extent we can, we will flesh that out as the EIR is being prepared, so it can the potential opportunities are being considered in the EIR, infrastructure needs involved there, ultimate uses of the water and the environmental impacts of that. So those are all the upcoming efforts. But the main, a lot of the workshops that we've been conducting over the last few months to get to a site selection. Now that we're at that, now we dive deeper into the work and really focus on workshops that relate to the different documents, the EIR and the FMP, and move forward from there. As we get into 2017, we'll be in a position to have the draft EIR come out. There's a big public review process and workshop and responding to comments and so on and so forth that relate to that. And then there'll be a series of other workshops that relate to the other major documents that lead ultimately to a project that we can all move forward with. But we're not there yet. A lot of that's in 2017. So that's a very brief overview of the upcoming efforts from now to the end of this year and then a little bit beyond.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. John, I caught the city council meeting on YouTube, and yes, they said the South Bay Boulevard site. With the topographic survey, the environmental side, are you still looking at both locations on that south? You brought it to us originally. I think there was 2 locations down there on the South Bay site. Are you still looking at both of them?
We still are for planning purposes. The one we prefer is the one that's right on the, to be honest, the one that we prefer is the one that's right on the opposite side of the hill from Casa de Flores.
Oh, okay, so it's a closer
It's the one that's a
in.
little less visible. We don't cross the coastal streams to get there.
Oh, okay.
So, but we're continuing to look at both just
Oh,
because
okay.
we want to make sure we've,
I just wasn't sure if a determination was
No,
made
sir.
as to one or the other.
Not yet.
Thank you.
I think that's a good example of the kind of thing that we hope to ferret out through the EIR process to some extent. But Mike's right about where our initial thoughts are.
Thank you.
Okay, open it up to questions. I'll start with you.
That site that you're preferring, is that the county or is that the city?
they're both county.
They're both county.
Both
You're
are
not
county.
looking at any of the sites that.
No, we're looking at the 2 that are, they're basically right over the hill from Casa de Flores.
Okay. And then the other question, you talk about the EIR, and your draft EIR, are you, you referred to your capacities and all your studies, and the 2006 sewer system master plan had a negative deck. My understanding is it had a negative deck regarding environmental impact. So are you going to be reviewing that environmental impact during that draft EIR?
I think what you do with any CEQA process, you look at the project in front of you and you evaluate the potential impacts of that. You can use old documents to help provide background information to help inform what you're looking at now, but the whole of the project is what you have to look at, which in this case is the FMP, Facility Master Plan, the reclamation opportunities, the infrastructure that lead to and from the site to support those efforts, and any kind of site preparation, and to the extent that it's appropriate, any kind of work that relates to pulling the existing plant offline in the sense that it all comes together as one project. So with respect to that document or any other document that relates to infrastructure or the wastewater plant, those are background information, but they're not points to say there was a negative deck done before, therefore that's what we're doing now. I think we're looking at an EIR in the whole of a project, which is a current project to put in a new facility from scratch.
So just for the public's understanding, when that study was done, it got a negative deck because the environmental impacts from that study was pushed down to the current wastewater treatment plant reevaluation. Now that since we're moving off the plant, we don't have to look at those environmental impacts at all?
I think, again, we're looking at a CEQA process that relates to this project, and the extent to which this project has any relationship to infrastructure that's near the existing wastewater treatment plant for pipeline extension or replacement or lift station activities. We have to look at those things in this document. So that's why we're doing an EIR, because we anticipate there's going to be significant impacts that we'll need to mitigate, and we don't know the extent to which those are. And this is a large project. Why that previous project was considered for a negative declaration, my own personal experience is I don't know the reasons, but I do know that that's a process that's completed and really has only tangential relationship to this, because it's an old process, it's an old project. It was 10 years ago. It's information in the books and in the record for right now.
Okay, so basically that was a capacity issue. So you're just assuming that capacity is a solid, and you're not addressing that as far as the impacts?
We're going to address what the capacity of this new facility is relative to how it will serve the build out of the city. Rob may have more to add to that, but we're going to look at the capacity of the new project for how it's designed for long-term build out, and that's how we look at capacity for this project.
So this summer, we'll be releasing an RFP for a sewer master plan also, sewer system master, so the collection system. We'll call it the One Water Plan because we want to address the collection system, the water system, and the stormwater system all in one document, since they're really all city infrastructure that is somewhat interrelated. So that sewer system, collection system capacity will be addressed in that document, which will go through its own environmental process, not related to the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, so when we're looking at that, are we also going to be looking at the industrial discharges from like places like Mission Linden and Culligan?
Yes, and we may look at different ways to assess those, because we use the EPA strength factors, which are mainly related to BOD, not salts. So they have, while they are an industrial discharger, they have fairly low BOD and suspended solids. So if you use the EPA method, they wouldn't have high strength wastewater. Getting a little off subject here, but this will be brought forward through our Public Works Advisory Board, and we'll probably do an update to the WRFCAC as we move further along in the process.
Yeah, I think it's on subject because we're talking about treating wastewater with a water reclamation facility. So
No, the one point you did raise is we have been working on the salinity control plan to specifically look at discharge from Culligan and how to get them out of the collection system. And so we're working on a permitting strategy there. And over the next couple of months, we'll have an update to bring back to WRFCAC on that. So we are looking at how to do that. We've had some positive discussions with Regional Water Quality Control Board. So we're gonna come back with a strategy in the next few months, specifically to Culligan.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
Just a quick question. I'm curious as to who is conducting you call it continued biological and cultural fatal flaws studies. Do you have consultants on board that are doing this work? I don't remember seeing anything in our prior budgets that identify consultants. And if you're using previous studies, how old are those previous studies and who did the work?
Sure. We're conducting new studies. The biological report is being done by Kevin Merck, who's part of our project management team. He's actually working with us and has been integrated and was always originally part of our team to do that. So that's work that's ongoing right now within our current budget. The cultural resource work would be done by Far Western, similar to the kind of work that was conducted at Rancho Colina and at the Rigetti site. And the concept is that those studies will be used and done at the level to support an EIR such that ESA can use the information directly in their report. And those consultants would in effect be supportive studies for their EIR.
In terms of the schedule, it looks like they're up for review starting July 15th, so basically in another week or two. They're up for review by ESA.
Yeah, I
don't know if
go
that's
ahead.
still on time.
Yeah, I'll jump. So the intention there is they're going to review the available information, so the full studies may not be done yet. That just means we're going to have a download to ESA on available studies and what data is available.
Well, then that goes back to my original question. Who did the previous studies? How old are they? Are they potentially stale at this point? And did they cover the areas of concern?
Right. We're not relying on old studies. We had old information. We know we need new studies. We expect that the work that Kevin Merck and Far Western will be doing will be done within the next month or so that ESA can use brand new work that covers the specific areas we'll be dealing with on the South Bay Boulevard site.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing in regards to, John, your presentation, the next 6 months, there's a lot of work going on, a lot of really important work, and there's also, we have 8 meetings and workshops, a lot of opportunity for the public to participate, and I really encourage that the members of the community attend these meetings, including the general plan and the local coastal plan workshop. There's various study sessions, and then my other request would be is that I think the first meeting is coming up in August, to make sure that we have, if we can, I know it's difficult to nail down all the consultants to make sure the appropriate people here are here for a meeting date and then finding a location that's going to work, but to have sufficient time to notify the public. And so that, I would say at least a 2-week notification. And then perhaps for the rest of the year as we go through, maybe, I don't know if it could be just a tentative schedule that's published in the Bay Bulletin. This is what to look out for the rest of 2016. Perhaps our city manager could write one of his columns and say, hey, we've got a lot going on. We've got at least 8 meetings, workshops, try to attend and do something like that so that we make sure we have good attendance.
Those are great thoughts and thoughts we share too. As Mike alluded, we did meet with the consultant team, the ESA team, as well as Black and Veatch, to try to coordinate how those things will play out. And we do agree that having a lot of notice to the public in advance is very crucial. That's why I stated earlier, we intend to do an NOP scoping meeting, and we do have a tentative date. We're trying to work toward that to make sure that works. But we agree, we need to make sure we have all the players who need to hear all this, and the public needs enough notice. You did mention something else that I forgot to, but I want to mention it too, and that's to have a workshop that relates to the general plan LCP update as that relates to this project. Tentatively, we're looking at, and we spoke with Scott Graham this morning about that, tentatively we're looking into September or October for a workshop that allows that process to be informed by this one and vice versa, so the public can understand what's going on there, and we make sure that the facility master plan is dealing with appropriately sized infrastructure to deal with whatever happens there, and just as importantly, that the EIRs for both processes are telling the same story about both efforts. So that's a really important meeting to have, and thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, Jenny, go for it.
Okay, I have a few questions, and then I had some comments on the updated outreach strategy. So in terms of my questions, wanted to mention that, in the past few months, the City Council and the WRF-CAC have received numerous letters from Morro Bay citizens regarding their questions and concerns about the WRF. And I'm just wondering, has a written report of the recent field trip to other WWTFs been done? That was one of the questions. And there were questions on costs. How were they derived? There were questions about, actually statements regarding problems with outreach, about delivery of postcards that, the delivery was inadequate. Some of the neighbors didn't receive the postcards, and apparently there was an issue with the city's listserv. So I'm wondering how are these written responses from Morro Bay citizens being handled? Who is providing the responses? Where is the docket containing this communication located? I know we had suggested a couple of months ago maybe having the docket located in the public library. And for that matter, I'm wondering about the oral statements that were made at the WRF-CAC and the City Council meetings. Are we going to provide any written comments on that? So those are my general comments on the outreach. And then in terms of the specific strategy, I didn't really see that it changed very much since the strategy that we saw last September. And I know that all of us made several suggestions to improve the strategy at our February, August, and September meetings. And I didn't really see any of the suggestions that they were followed. So I'm going to mention a couple of them. We had mentioned that one of the problems with outreach is that you can't count on people reading the Tribune or the Bay News, and that, or even some people don't even have televisions, some don't have computers, and so I think John mentioned this, one of the most effective ways is to provide very simple postcards or brochures, pamphlets, to every citizen in Morro Bay. And I know you've started to do that, and I think that you got a very positive response. But what I didn't see in the outreach strategy, it's kind of hard to judge it because I can't quantify anything. It doesn't say how many brochures are going to be produced, nor their frequency. And I'd like to see a little more specificity in the outreach plan. And also, the brochures or the pamphlets or postcards, whatever you want to call them, I would suggest that they address key milestones, and you would sprinkle that in here. So, and they would include questions and answers. Some of the questions that were brought up, at the public meetings. Again, everybody doesn't participate in those meetings, but everybody receives mail. I'm really encouraged that you're interacting with the regulatory agencies. For one thing, you're establishing a rapport with them, and the other thing is that, they may know about grants that are coming down the pike that aren't even published yet, and they could keep us in mind. And so, for that reason, I would suggest adding US EPA to your list of regulatory agencies, because I noticed it was missing. But that's about it for my comments. So if you could address my questions about the docket and how the city is going to be responding to specifically the written comments.
Okay, I'll see if I can, and just to some extent, I know because I missed the last city council meeting and WRFCAC meeting, I don't know to the extent the issues were discussed there, but I can tell you I don't believe that there's been any written response or a written summary done yet relative to the field trip that was done to the wastewater plants. So that's something we can certainly address. As far as providing, and you can remind me if I missed something here, relative to the various written and oral comments that have been made, concerns about the project. I know that responses to those have been weaved into the presentations before WRFCAC and the council over the last month or so, and therefore in the minutes and in the record that way. But a written summary that's been available as a standalone document has not been produced. It's something we can do.
Can I ask, though, won't that be part of the CEQA process?
And that was where I was going to go next. In the CEQA process, there's a whole formal, I imagine we'll hear many of the same issues, and we'd like to hear the same kind of comments at the NOP scoping process and then into the draft EIR process that we will need to respond to directly and will be in the record. So again, that's another opportunity for feedback, but a more formal way where you normally would be providing the written responses. And then as far as your suggestions in the updated outreach plan, again, I'd like to consider the outreach plan you have as an updated, mostly updated in terms of dates and where we're going and what we've done. But there, at the beginning of the entire package right there, it talks about all the different kinds of things that can be done or are being done. Newsletters, email blasts, emails and such are all part of that. And we would agree it's been effective to have those as part of the process, and we'll continue to do those things, even if they're not explicitly mentioned on certain dates. But the point that your point of doing them, I think, is a good one. I think as we go forward, we're going to be meeting as a team to decide what the best way to put that information out most cost effectively and most effectively in general. And I think key to milestones is going to be important. I think the NOP scoping process, we want to make sure that's well understood, the dates and what the purpose of that is going to be. So yes, we agree with that. We want to refine that. At least let's start internally, but your point is well taken. In terms of adding the US EPA to the list of regulatory agencies, we agree with that. And again, we're trying to show here as comprehensively as we can, but obviously there's a wide net we want to cast on the regulatory agencies, and they'd be among them. So we agree that should be part of the process.
Yeah, I think you've made a lot of progress, and we've learned in the last couple of months what happens when people are taken by surprise. And so to the extent we could be more proactive and keeping people informed along the way. I mean, I don't know how frequent you want to provide messages to people, but whenever there's something major that's being discussed, even at the WRFCAC meetings, you might consider getting that information out there. Again, so that we're not reactive, we're proactive.
One of the things that we did find through the last few months is the most effective method was really direct mailers as opposed to emails. So one of the items that we have discussed is the importance of direct mailers for major meetings, for major decision points, and then for regular updates. So you'll see more of that from us moving forward, as opposed to working through the email blasts through the MailChimp software. So I would say for the notice of preparation, one of the things we'll talk to the city about is possibly doing some sort of direct mailer to folks to inform them of that meeting.
Great. Any other questions or comments, Bill?
I guess we're still on public outreach. My suggestion is at the last meeting for this group and the subsequent city council meeting, the owner of one of those South Bay sites was acknowledged that he had not been contacted concerning a necessary right-of-way to those sites. So I would very strongly recommend that you keep all property owners that are adjacent to or party to those sites very, very well informed. He hadn't been contacted. And the second thing is that I think is very, very important now that we have drainage down into the Choro, you better keep the NEP, the National Estuary Program, very, very well informed of what's going on. They have had to put up with California Men's Colony dumps over the years, and they're pretty sensitive to all that. So you got to hold their hand. I strongly recommend that you keep them informed frequently on updates.
One thing I did want to just briefly correct. So the gentlemen that came to the meeting that were two adjacent property owners were Mr. Mino and Mr. Thorson. Their comment was not that they hadn't been informed. Their comment was before we contacted them, they did not know that South Bay Boulevard site was being considered. So we had contacted them prior to those meetings, had one-on-one meetings with them. Several of us, a couple of council members had been out to their site with them. And we in fact have a follow-up meeting with them later this week to get comments. So we are engaged with them. I just wanted to assure you of that.
Okay.
And we'll work closely with them.
Good. Don't forget the NEP.
Yes,
right.
and NEP was on our list as well. We had made attempts to contact them prior to the last council meeting, and weren't able to have a meeting with them. But we are going to have a follow-up meeting with them in the next couple of weeks for sure. That's critical.
Any other comments before I take public comment? All right. Any public comment on this item? Come forward, please. State your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Do you want me to write my name? Tina Metzger. Nutmeg Avenue, Morro Bay. Chair, members of WRFCAC. I agree with the member who wanted a field trip report. And we've often wondered why there wasn't a field trip report. And line 55 of the program schedule, Phase 2, Task 4, feasibility screening of the lower Morro Valley. it just seems like we're still focusing on Morro Valley rather than the Chorro Valley. Let's see. Under program schedule, May 3rd, WRFCAC meeting. It states that the recommended site is the Tri-W, but it fails to state that WRFCAC voted to remove the Rigetti site from the city's list, and that needs to be stated. Notification, outreach plan. I did not receive the postcard, the colored postcard. Other people I know did not receive the colored postcard. Property owners are not receiving notification of workshops and information. Now, I did receive the slick multicolored flyer. So sometimes you have the right list, perhaps, and sometimes you don't. But it's been very spotty in our area of town, and we're major stakeholders in this. So something needs to be done about that. Let's see. Strategic framework for targeting key stakeholders under general public stakeholder group. I request that your outreach includes an honest description of the project. My friends on the other side of town don't even know what the project is. They think it's a building that's a water treatment facility. They don't understand what the project is. So please use honesty in the outreach effort. At what point will we know what all the alternatives are? And how will that be? What is the criteria for that? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Chair, would you like us to respond
Sure.
as staff to
Yeah,
some of
please.
those comments? Because we would like to respond to those. First, on the field trip report, the original intention of the field trip was to take WRFCAC members and some council members to go see water reclamation facility sites. We wound up inviting, relatively last minute, to be honest, some members of the public. But it was not to be a noticed meeting or anything of that nature. Plans solidified late. So we took folks down. They toured the Santa Paula and Fillmore facilities. Regarding a written report, I'm not sure what Citizens Advisory Committee would like to see on that. I mean, what I would suggest is maybe the members of WRFCAC who attended could give a brief oral summary of what they saw, what their thoughts are. That might be more appropriate as opposed to a written report, given that was really the purpose, was really to educate members of the Citizens Advisory Committee, members of council, on what facilities with similar treatment processes are like. So that's how I would respond to the need for a written report. Is maybe the best approach would just be for Citizens Advisory Committee members to give comments if they like to on what they saw or observed. The second is regarding line 55 on the program schedule. Line 55 is an item that's already complete. That was an effort by a study by Fugro, the feasibility screening of the lower Morro Valley. So that's a study that was complete. You'll notice it was referenced as being completed back in December of last year.
And that was for recharge.
That was to look at recharge
specifically
specifically upstream of the Narrows.
It wasn't for site selection. It was for
That's
recharge.
correct. That was for groundwater recharge. Thank you. Let's see. Regarding the outreach and notification, we did hear some comments back about the whether items were received or not. I can say that at this point, what we've done is we've worked with the city to try to combine the databases that are available for property ownership as well as using we used the USPS, what they call their every door service, where you identify all the areas of town you want covered and give them the flyers, and they take them out and deliver them as part of the mail. So between those two efforts, we should have caught everybody we could. We did hear that some folks did not receive mailers, but I can tell you that with the process we used, we did everything we could to reach out. We're going to keep trying to improve that process, and we'll work with the post office before we send the next ones out, and make sure we've got everything shown on the maps, and then also work with city staff to determine any lessons learned when they went through and cleaned up the ownership database or any of that information. So we'll do everything we can to make sure that goes out. Let's see, I'll turn the rest over to John.
Yeah, just a couple other things. I know it was mentioned that the outreach effort needs to have an honest description of the project. We would agree with that, and we believe that our descriptions have been as accurate and as honest as what's known, and we'll continue to do that. So if there's any concern that there's been any dishonesty, we can assure you there has not been. So we're going to make sure that things are as transparent. I think if the intent is to provide all the information we can, we certainly will do that. And then relative to when we will know when all the alternatives will be established, again, this relates to things we've talked about consistently over the last month, to say during the EIR, beginnings of the EIR process, the scoping meeting will be important for people to provide input about their concerns relative to issues, and it could be about alternatives and such. We're going to work with post that meeting, we're going to work with the EIR consultant at the staff level to consider all that information and other information we already have relative to different processes, all these different sites we've considered, to whittle that down to different alternatives that make sense for the basic purpose of CEQA, which is to consider sites that potentially, or not just sites, but processes or alternative designs that potentially address and mitigate one issue or another to less than what would be considered under the proposed project. The reason for that being to allow the City Council to make an informed decision about the project and understand that the alternatives that may or may not mitigate for one issue or another, how they relatively play out, and the extent to which they meet project objectives as well as the proposed project, so the council can understand the universe of potential options before they go forward with the project, with the focus always remaining on the proposed project throughout. So we'll be looking at establishing those alternatives in the wake of the EIR scoping meeting, and certainly prior to or around, within the next few months, but before the facility master plan is completed for draft purposes.
And that's something I wanted to bring up because it was mentioned by the speaker. We're an advisory committee to the City Council, and at one meeting we advised the City Council to not consider Rigetti anymore. And ultimately, with their decision to move forward with South Bay Boulevard, they've effectively done that. But CEQA is a state process under state law that requires an alternatives analysis, and so that regardless of our advice to the City Council under a framework of state law, that site could come up for consideration as an alternative because we're required to do so.
That's not really true.
Well,
what you're saying.
Well, one thing I did want to point out is we did look to the city attorney for advice on that, and the city's attorney advice was not to take any alternatives off the table prior to beginning the CEQA process. So we also got legal opinion on that.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right.
Oh, wait a minute, I have a question. How much does it cost to send a direct mailer out? Approximately.
I believe the mailing cost last time was right around $2,500, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
So we want to be judicious about how we apply it, but I do think for some things like an NOP scoping meeting, we may, we will work with staff on that.
I agree with that, and from the finance aspect, we want to balance things. And I also wanted to comment on the field trip report because I saw some of those emails. I would be of the opinion that the WRFCAC members that attended that would be updating us at a meeting, and it's a public document. It's not like we went on a 3-day field trip, or I didn't go because I'd been there before, but we didn't spend thousands of dollars on this. And I think when we start, we have to, we're trying to get our hands around the budget and the amended budget and the amount of staff time that's being charged to this project. So I think we have to be very resourceful in how we use your resources. So I'm open to just some comments on what you saw there. Thank you.
I did go to the both the plants, and I was invited as a RFCAC member. And first of all, I'll take issue also with the email that came through regarding the cost at all. First of all, private cars were used. Their own gas was used as far as I saw. Nobody bought me lunch. Nobody paid me. We just went down. We took a look. I went because I've never seen the MBR system, which is the membrane bioreactor systems, which both of them have. I'm pretty familiar with the SBR, and those are the two types of systems that are being recommended for Morro Bay. Actually, I was quite impressed with their abilities. I think I was a little more impressed with the first one than the second one. But the second one was actually, everything was housed inside buildings and underneath the slab of the building. And it was, when you talk about hiding something, they hit it pretty well, except for the ponds where they're trying to get rid of the water ultimately, which in our case, we're looking at doing recharge of some form. But I found the fact of odors, everything else were handled quite well at both of them. I just happened to feel that the first one, I just want to say, felt a little better managed, and that was, I think it was it wasn't Santa Paula, it was
Fillmore, and then Santa Paula.
Was the first, and that was the one for whatever reason. But they did have some outdoor facilities there. You did not smell it beyond their fence line. That was one of the criteria placed on them at the time. I could appreciate with the city and city staff's time, and I feel a little bit like between some of these emails flying through that they're the whipping boys and scapegoats for everything that the citizenry may feel is wrong with this system. But the reality is everything takes staff time. They're worried about the cost of this field trip, but they have no query about the cost of preparing a report. When you opened it up to the public, I think that's when it got a little bit, people started saying, well, gee, you sprung us on it late. It wasn't meant to be for the public originally. It was meant to be for RFCAC members and the city council. And that's why I think there was about 4 of us from this board. Richard was there and Bill was there. And I'm not sure if there was maybe one other that was there. And I'll let them speak on the...
Well, I think instead of doing it now, maybe we agendize it as a presentation at the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
And maybe afford. You can skip your time, but just so it's for the public, they know that there's an agendized presentation on our presentation calendar, and afford each of you, up to 5 minutes to discuss your thoughts on it. I'd prefer to do it that way instead of just, again, springing it on the public right now. Richard, are you okay with that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so conclude business items B2.
I do have a question, another question for staff. From the schedule, it's just a very brief schedule. It says here on item 17, South Bay Boulevard site, that you're going to complete this task by one month, August 15th. You're going to have a site by August 15th?
That will be finished with a lot of with the biological studies, cultural resource, and also with the topographic survey. That's what that refers to. That's a roll-up task. And if you look, 17 is South Bay Boulevard site. 18 and 19 are tasks underneath there, the fatal flaw assessments and survey.
They look like they're subsets, though.
They are.
It looks like the overall 17. Well, let me go back to milestones then. It seems to me that would be a milestone when you acquire or at least commit to negotiations for a final site, a site selection. Wouldn't that be a milestone? To me, site selection would be a milestone, and the second milestone I find missing is the decision whether Cayucas is in or out. And I think those are two milestones that you need to add to your significant milestone summary that would be updated or at least acknowledged. And I think you need both of those in there.
Okay, so what I would point to is really the council decision on the site was June 14th. And for us, that was a milestone to begin the planning and permitting process. Property negotiation cannot be concluded until the CEQA process is done, based on the opinion from the city attorney.
Well, but you're still playing with two sites, are you not?
Well, we're looking at one general area, South Bay Boulevard. So there are two sites there, but they're a stone's throw from each other.
Don't you have to choose one or the other?
We're going to focus more on the one immediately behind the hill. We're going to analyze both in the EIR.
It's also important to point out that they're both under the same ownership, and it's just a question of which part of the site we would
Oh, I didn't know
So we'll
that.
resolve this
They
through-
are the same ownership.
Yes, sir.
And so you're dealing with the same party, and all you're
right.
doing is trying to figure out the footprint?
Is it a couple hundred feet this way or that way kind of thing?
Okay, then the second thing is, okay, I'll stand by my Cayucas comment. I think that's a milestone to decide one way or the other.
So the thing that I would comment on that is the direction from Cayucas has been that they want to develop their own project alone.
That's my impression.
That's their formal decision and direction. Our opinion is there really is no point in the process where Cayucas couldn't come forward and say they'd like to be part of it. But as we move forward, it gets more expensive. When you move into construction, for example,
Wouldn't that
come
be
forward and
part
be a
of your
partner.
site selection process? You would have to go 50% larger on your facility, would you not?
well, what we're doing with the facility master plan is part of the scope that Black & Veatch has had for facility master plan is to look at what additional space and what additional cost would be to accommodate Cayucas as an alternative in the master plan. So we'll have that analysis in the master plan.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And didn't we direct or advise, sorry, we didn't direct, we advised council to reach out one more time to Cayucas, and a letter was sent by our city council, and their response was, thanks, but no thanks, we're moving out on our own, we want our own plant.
Exactly true, and that was reported, I believe, at the May city council meeting, not the June one. So, yeah, we reached out, they said thanks but no thanks, and that's where we're at. And Cayucas had made that decision back in April 2015, and that simply confirmed the decision they had made at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's all kinds of issues involved, lift stations, pipe size, yada, 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 yada. So,
I just wanted to...
And also the joint powers agreement, the current joint powers agreement, if that's the case, why hasn't our city attorney brought that to the table?
That's a subject for the joint meeting. We have not been able to put a joint meeting together between both parties. They've declined to meet with the city of Morro Bay for several times. I think our next scheduled meeting that we're going to try to get together is in September.
Well, yeah, but we're the lead agency here, right?
We're equal powers in that joint agreement.
Yeah, but the permit is, we're the lead agency on the 301H waiver, right?
It's a joint permit. Joint.
Yeah, but we're the lead agency, correct?
We're not, there's no lead agency. It's permitted as the Cayucas Morro Bay wastewater treatment plant.
What my question is then is why, if they are going in their own direction, why aren't we addressing that like immediately at a city council level?
Addressing what, though?
Addressing what?
We're proceeding with our
The
own
current
plan.
joint powers agreement would be defunct. If you read it, it kind of like, it was based on...
It doesn't go away by itself. It doesn't go, it doesn't...
I'm not saying it going away. It needs to be renegotiated.
Of course it does, because there still will be joint facilities, the outfall and a line coming down Main Street.
The primary purpose of that joint powers agreement is management of the existing wastewater treatment plant. So as long as there's a treatment plant that these two jointly own, then that JPA governs the operation of that plant.
It also addresses upgrade and it also addresses the issue that we're dealing with here right now, building a new plant. And if they are out, that's addressed in that joint powers agreement and that gap needs to be filled.
We agree, and we have to get together with the sanitary district to discuss those. Both boards have to meet together.
I just wanted to add a comment. The reason I provide updates on CSD is because various citizens from Cayucos and Morro Bay have approached me and told me that they really want us to have one plant. And I know we're proceeding down our line and they're proceeding down theirs. The reason I say that I continue to have hope that maybe they'll get together, either they'll come to us or something might happen, we end up at Chevron. It's just the community itself seems like they're more supportive of a joint plant than the actual board members of the CSD. That's just my opinion.
Well, I mean, we have an empty audience here, so I wouldn't agree with that the community is supportive of a joint plant. We've been talking for a while now about the process, and Cayucos isn't interested in a plant. We're moving forward individually as well, and a mailer was sent out, a nice mailer, I would add, that went out to the residents and indicated that's where we were going, and there's still nobody here. So,
and subsequent to those communications, there also have been letters that have come to the city council and to us, as well as information in newspapers, in the editorial sections. I'm just pointing out that everybody's not 100% behind.
I'm not saying everyone's 100%, but there's not the community. You implied the community was behind a joint plan. I would disagree with that statement.
Several members of the community.
Okay, that
Fair?
I can digest.
Good.
Yes. Okay, we're on closing member closing comments. So, no.
One more question.
Sure.
Kind of going back again to the fatal flaws assessments, and that's what we're working on now with the fatal flaws assessment that we're working. Oh.
They're just closer to you.
That we're working on for the South Bay Boulevard site, and we've already completed it. Fatal flaws for McIlvain and Rigetti, and those are 3 of the projects that we're going forward within the alternatives analysis. But I'm wondering what happened to the Madonna site, and did we carry it forward enough to do a fatal flaws assessment in terms of biology and cultural, or are we going forward with it in an equal sort of manner in the environmental document in regards to our alternatives analysis? Because it's not on the list here. I'm just curious how that all is going to jive.
Sure. Okay, first of all, let's clarify. There were assessments done at Rancho Colina and at Rigetti, and very preliminary read at Madonna. Whether or not any of that information at any 3 of those sites goes into the EIR is an open question, because we don't know what the alternatives we're going to be looking at. What the information that was provided for those sites was useful to do was to determine whether those sites could be feasible from those issues perspectives, and the answer preliminarily was yes. They weren't fatally flawed, but all of them had challenges for both issues. At this point, we have that information. We're not sure how that plays out in the EIR process, if at all, because if we don't look at any of those sites as alternatives, there's no discussion. If we do look at any of those sites as alternatives, we'll use that information as part of that assessment. So I think I just want to be careful to characterize what has been done. We have gone and looked at all those sites, and a lot of that information has been summarized. But again, what we're looking at now for South Bay Boulevard is to take that kind of analysis to a higher level, not just do a preliminary assessment, but a full assessment of that site, so it's sufficient to use as the basis of an EIR analysis. And that hasn't been done yet for South Bay Boulevard, but we're starting that right now.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to closing comments. Any closing comments by any members before we adjourn? Well, I would just like to remind everybody listening and here that we did reach a major milestone last month was the city council picking a site to move forward with that deserves the pat on our backs, I think, because we've carried that for a very long time these last few years, and to staff and to the community, because I think one of the criticisms of the last project was it was done in a black box, and the city council opened up the process, created this advisory committee, and we started down the path of analyzing technology and sites. And not everybody agrees, but we did do a public process that reached out to the community, and the site selection evolved because of that. So I think the project process is working, and that milestone was reached after very good community discussion and deliberation, and it wasn't easy. There's obviously a lot of emotions and distress and dialogue that went along with it, but we hung in there and moved forward and evolved based on what the community was telling us. And so I think we should all be applauded on that, and thank staff and thank the city council for so far a very good project. And with that, we will adjourn until our next meeting, which is August 2nd, 2016, back here at the Vets Memorial Building at 3 p.m. See you all then.